My husband once looked me dead in the eyes and called me paranoid and controlling while I clutched our bank statement like it was a confession. The numbers on the page were wrong in a way that made my stomach drop, zeros where our retirement should have been, a balance that read like a cruel joke. He said it like it was a diagnosis and shoved clothes into a bag as if his indignation justified his exit. He slammed the door behind him and left the house feeling like a hollow shell, like someone had taken the map to my future and shredded it in front of me. If you've ever had your world quietly rearranged by someone you trusted, you know the first thing that follows is disbelief. My hands went numb, then cold. I paced the kitchen until my legs ached, replaying every argument, "It's fine," and "we'll figure it out later." I searched my memory for signs I missed, late receipts, odd phone calls, a lipstick scent that wasn't mine, and thought maybe I had been too intrusive, too suspicious. Maybe I had deserved his anger. The voice in my head that woke me up at 3 a.m. whispered the worst thing of all, maybe I was the problem. A week later, a message landed in my inbox and ripped that whisper to pieces. It was from a woman whose profile I didn't recognize, casual and cruel in its simplicity. Attached were photos, her and him on a sun-soaked balcony, champagne flutes raised, arms entwined. In one image the resort's name glowed on a sign behind them, a hotel so exclusive you didn't go unless you had a lot of cash and no shame. In another, he was laughing, tanned and careless, the shirt he wore the same one I'd seen stuffed into the bag the day he left. The photos arrived with a short line, "Thought you should know." When I scrolled, the reality set in like ice. Each pixel was a hammer blow. He hadn't run out for groceries. He had run away with our savings. Every plan we'd made for quiet evenings, for emergencies, for growing old together, gone. I remember the physical sensation. My throat tightened, my chest felt compressed, and a hot, furious light spread behind my eyes. I wanted to scream, to smash something, to make the world acknowledge the theft. Instead I sat very still and watched anger turn into something sharper, fixation. It would have been easy to explode. To pound on his car window, to post the photos and watch him burn. But the kind of revenge that satisfies doesn't come from a scream. It comes from a careful, patient dismantling of the lie. I decided then that I would not be the hysterical woman who lost everything on a whim. I would be methodical, I would win back what I could, and I would make him understand what it felt like to be exposed. The first thing I did was collect proof. I printed screenshots, saved messages, gathered receipts, and made copies of bank statements. Every small thing that could connect the dots, hotel confirmations, credit card charges, photos with timestamps, went into a growing folder labeled with neat, terrifying precision. My hands shook the first night I compiled it, but the shaking was different now. It was steadying, like a hand learning to wield a tool. I called a lawyer. My voice felt small when I spoke, but the woman on the other end was efficient and not impressed by performances. She asked for dates, amounts, and evidence. When I sent the folder, she said 3 words that tasted like sugar and steel: "This is enough." She explained, in plain terms, that even if the cash was gone, marital assets, our home, his share of pension contributions, future earnings, could be divided. She explained how infidelity could influence settlement in certain circumstances, how hiding assets could be challenged. For the first time since the word, divorce, had been tossed at me like a threat, I felt a map in my hand. When he came home from his trip, he walked in like he had left a victory parade, hair still damp from a pool, a complacent tan that made my hands clench. He expected drama, maybe tears, or else the blank, brittle silence of someone who wants no trouble. He got something he did not expect: a calm, practiced face and a dinner set as if nothing had changed. I could have shouted, I could have thrown the folder at him and watched him crumble then and there. Instead I watched him eat, I watched his fingers drum on the table, and I felt the delicious cold of patience. "You look different," he said between bites, like he was testing a theory. "Do you want more wine?" I asked. "It's good with the chicken." He laughed, a short, self-satisfied sound, because in his head his bravado had not met consequence. He kept up his casualness until I set the folder down across from his plate. Its weight looked as heavy as the truth. He frowned, assumed it was junk mail, and opened it in a way that suggested he expected nothing but nonsense. Then the photos began, then the bank statements, then the hotel receipts, sequenced like a chain he could not pretend not to see. At first his face went through the stages I'd rehearsed in my head 1,000 times: confusion, anger, denial. He tried to tell me that I was being hysterical, that the charges were miscategorized, that the photos were staged. I watched his mouth form the same words he'd once used, paranoid, controlling, but hypocritically, those words had lost their power over me. My heartbeat steadied. I had rehearsed what I would say when gaslighting came. I had practiced silence for the moments that needed it most. This was a conversation I had trained for. You stole from us, I said, precise and quiet. You spent our retirement on a vacation with someone else. He laughed, a sound thinner now, the laugh of someone who expects a public to his own performance. You've got nothing, he said. You're making a scene. I didn't shout. I slid a copy of my lawyer's business card toward him and told him I had already spoken with someone who knew how to untangle this. I told him I had not posted the photos, not yet, because burning him publicly would be too easy and also petty. I wanted legal ruin, not gossip. I wanted consequences that lasted longer than a moment of humiliation. He tried to charm, to apologize in the kind of half voice that is meant to be salvaging and slippery. He promised to make it right. He said he was sorry, classic inventory of words without action. I let him talk long enough for his lies to pile up in the open air where they look small and ridiculous. Then I told him to pack. The bag he'd packed before seemed small now, comic, a child's bundle. The next moves were quieter. I filed for separation. I handed the folder to his friends when they came sniffing for a version of the story that would make him right, and most of them looked at the evidence and didn't bother to find excuses. Reputation is a delicate thing. When a person's private life becomes public with hard proof, people prefer to step back rather than step into a lie. The best part wasn't the filings or the lawyer fees. The secure, slow part was watching the mistress's behavior change as the pressure mounted. She stopped sending photos. She stopped tagging him. She became a ghost in places where she'd been loud. Money has a way of clarifying loyalties. When there were no more champagne posts, and when rumors smelled like courtrooms, she quietly slipped away with a message that said more than any of her smiling pictures had. I didn't know. Whether she meant it or not, the sentence fell into the legal canyon I'd made for him. Court was a theater and I had the script. He arrived smug, brittle confidence dressed up like armor. He thought he could stand and perform innocence. The judge didn't care for dramatic flourishes. The judge asked for papers, for receipts, for the concrete ties between his spending and the disappearance of our nest egg. My folder did the talking. Each line item was a nail. Each timestamp, a lever. He muttered, he spluttered, he tried to claim forgetfulness, mistaken identity, a string of improbable coincidences. The judge folded his hands and signed orders that left him stripped off the luxury of pretense. When the ruling came, it felt like a release valve. The house, officially, became mine to keep for the time being. Alimony was ordered. There were penalties for hidden withdrawals and a long, public accounting of where the money had gone. He left the courtroom smaller, not because he'd been physically reduced, but because the thing he'd relied on most, our silence, our shame, his ability to rewrite reality, had been taken away. He wandered out into the light with the same bag he'd once used to flee, but this time there was nowhere left for it to hide him. That night I sat on the porch with a cup of tea that had gone cold and watched the sky like someone learning to read a map again. There was no dramatic gloating, no triumphant Instagram post. Instead there was a quiet satisfaction, the kind that settles in your bones. I had wanted justice, not spectacle. I had wanted proof that the truth matters more than charm or lies. I had wanted to stop waking up at odd hours and wondering if I was the one who had cracked. Friends reached out, the ones who had watched me shrink in uncertainty and then watched me gather evidence like someone assembling armor. You were brave, they said, but bravery felt like a blunt instrument. What I had done felt more like learning a new language, legalese, paper trails, the cold arithmetic of accountability. It was technical, clinical, effective. So what did I learn? I learned that betrayal can feel like a personal failure because it strips you of an internal compass, but the failure is not yours. The failure belongs to the person who believed they could erase a life's work with a few careless charges and a pretty smile. I learned that revenge, when it's righteous, is less about making someone suffer for the joy of it and more about reclaiming your future and dignity. I learned that patience can be fiercer than rage. I learned that documentation is a form of power. If you've been told you're paranoid for asking a question about money, ask it louder. If you've been told you're controlling for wanting to see the receipts, then check them. There's no shame in wanting to understand where your life's work has gone. People who gaslight aren't clever, they only think they are. They confuse charm with character, and when you hold up evidence, the difference is suddenly very clear. They crumble. To the man who thought he could walk away with our savings and my silence, you were wrong. You thought your actions could be hidden behind flattery and excuses, but you underestimated how methodical someone you hurt could become. You thought I would be the hysteric who lost perspective. Instead I was the one who kept track. You thought you were smarter. You were reckless. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt betrayed and small and like the world tilted under you, know this: truth is a terrible but faithful friend. It will show up if you keep careful, and it will not favor cleverness over honesty. If you want to hear more stories like this, hit that like button and subscribe. Tell me in the comments what the most satisfying moment of justice you ever witnessed was. And if you're in the middle of a storm like mine, keep receipts, seek counsel, and know that calm, steady action can turn despair into a path forward.